We are live. We'll get going here in about 10 minutes. So if you are on here and watching it later on, you can skip forward about 8 or 9 minutes or so till we get started. Hey, Mason. Hey, Remington. Good to see you. Hey, Jack. Good to see you. Anybody know what this shape is called here? This monument that I'm standing on? I haven't quite started yet. Still waiting for some people to roll in, but I'm just kind of exploring around our area that we're going to start at. Hey, Eston, good to see you. Yeah, the graphics on this game, I agree, Jack, are pretty incredible. It's really fun to go in and explore these areas. The cool part is on the next one when we do Greece here in a few weeks. That is, those are some of those places are places I've actually been to, and so it's really neat to see them in a way that's different, reconstructed from ancient times. What it would have looked like, 2,500 years ago is pretty cool. Hi, Caden. Hey, Landon. Good to see you. So these shapes here, these are called obelisks. The tall, four-sided with a kind of a pyramid shape at the top. These were used a lot in the New Kingdom at the front of monuments and different temples and things like that. So these are Egyptian obelisks. They're all over the place. And a lot of the European conquerors who came in after stole these and brought them back to Europe. So if you go to Rome, for instance, there's a big obelisk right in the center of Vatican City where the Pope lives. If you go to London, there's a big obelisk in Trafalgar Square. There's all kinds of obelisks all over Europe. There's one in Paris, right in the middle of town too. So a lot of these obelisks that were here were since stolen by the Europeans and brought back over the sea. Oh, that was shallow water. Good thing I didn't die. A show with obelisks called Extinct. I haven't heard of that show. Hey Tristan, good to see you. Hi Kylie, good to see you. We're going to start here in about 1 minute. Oh, it's on BYU TV. I'll have to check that out. Maybe I'll switch my character today. Should be Cleopatra today. We'll try Cleopatra today. Hey Joel. All right, so we're about 10 minutes in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, just a couple of guidelines on the chat. I don't mind if you guys are chatting a little bit. You guys are doing a great job. You did a great job on Tuesday with that. Please don't spam the chat, though, because it makes it really difficult for me to kind of see if there are legitimate questions. So not sure why the narrator's talking there, but I guess so. Oh, there's our bird, Senu. So just make sure that you're not spamming the chat with stuff, just so I can kind of keep track. I've got my laptop in front of me that helps me see. The chat froze last time, so I stopped seeing them for a little while until I figured that out. And then I had my laptop on, so I can see your comments on there pretty well. So just trying to kind of keep up with that. So anyway, I don't know how many places we're going to go today, Jack. We're going to try to get to as many as we can, and we'll just kind of fly by the seat of our pants. Hey, Eli, good to see you. And just kind of see how it goes. So we'll just kind of wait and see. I do want to go into this temple. Then I want to look at some of the daily life things for the Egyptians. So, and again, if you're in my class, write down about 2 or 3 things on a Google Doc of 2 or 3 things that you learned for each spot that we go to, and then you can turn it into the assignment that I created this morning on the Google Classroom. And those of you who are trying to improve your grade, the grade will go up, and those of you just trying to learn, we'll get to see that too. So this should be good stuff. All right, so this is the Temple of Sekhmet here. You can see some of the architecture here at the front of the temple. These 2 tall pillars here on each side represent the rising and setting of the sun. So this would be the eastern pillar, which would be the rising of the sun, and then this would be the western, which would be the setting of the sun. There's supposed to be mountains representing each side of the pillar, or each side of the Nile River as the sun rises and sets. So each Egyptian temple usually featured that on the front, and we can see statues to Sekhmet here. I'm going to read you guys a story about Sekhmet next week, and I'll post that in a video. And she was a beast that was turned loose and devoured Egypt, but then eventually she was beast in the form of a lion and devoured lots of people in Egypt, but then she was captured. She was actually drugged and captured and turned into a goddess of love later on. So we're going to come in through the temple here. We're going to come over top of the Western Mountain. You can see some of these hieroglyphics here. Hopefully we'll get to a section where we can learn something about those. Just a real quick tour of the temple. Trying to see if there's a spot I can come down here. Quest run over a goat. Exactly what we're going to try for it. So the main part of the temple here, let's make this daytime because there will be more people in here. So I'm going to meditate here for a second. There we go. A few more people in here maybe. Coming in, there we go. So this main part of the temple is the public part. This is where you could come in and buy offerings. Remember, the relationship to the gods was very similar as the Romans had and the Mesopotamians had. You would bring something like a goat to the temple, or you would buy a goat at the temple, and then you could bring that in and kill it on an altar as a offering or a sacrifice to the god. As you get further into the temple, you start to get into areas that are a little more set off. This is for some of the lower priests, some offices. I thought there were offices in here. Maybe that was a different temple. But the different areas where the other priests work, they can do other things in here. In this area, there's stories of the gods will be written on the walls. Okay, you get into this area, there's a sacred pool. We can see some of the priests performing. Hey, Eliza, good to see you. We can see some of the priests performing some prayers and things in the pool here. And then you get back in, and this is where the god lives. And so we have, I think I can get down and do some sort of ritual here. I'm on that circle. And so the god lives in this part of the temple, in the back part, and this is only allowed for priests, would only be allowed to get back here. So we're illegal, but I guess we're the pharaoh, so we're allowed. But this is the area for Sekhmet, and this is her statue. And so this is not a statue. The Egyptians would have believed that this was actually an aspect of the goddess. This is the goddess, or part of the goddess. Not a statue representing the goddess, but this is the goddess. This Jack is a temple to Sekhmet, Sekmet, I believe. She's the lion-headed goddess in Egyptian mythology. And so I'll read you a story about Sekhmet next week, so that you guys will have a context for what she did. But most of the temples would have been set up very similarly to this. Oh, there's a cat back here. How'd the cat get in here? That wouldn't be allowed either. So the game's letting us back into places that we shouldn't be, and letting cats into places that they shouldn't be. Okay, and there's some water here, so you can cleanse yourself. And kind of dump water over your head so that you can be pure in the eyes of the goddess right here. Eli, we're going to talk about that. The main gods of Egypt are Ra, the god of the sun, Osiris, the god of the dead, his wife Isis, the goddess of magic. We've got Horus is Osiris and Isis' son, who's the god of pharaohs. We have Anubis, the god of mummies, Sekhmet, who becomes Hathor, the mother goddess, the goddess of love. Okay, and we're going to head back out here, and we're going to look at some fashions. And I'm going to read you guys a couple of stories next week. I'll have to go to school tomorrow and get the book, but I'll read you guys a couple of stories about the gods, which are pretty cool. These guys are preparing for a ceremony. They're going to bring a barge in. A boat in with the goddess, representing the goddess, into the temple here pretty quick. All right, so we're going to head to the marketplace here. You can see the market outside of the temple. And we're going to look at some of the daily life things that the Egyptians would have been involved in. So we're going to look at the clothes for now. So we're going to take this tour here.
Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Fashions.
We're going to look at ancient Egyptian fashions here. So just listen and follow along. This will be the second spot on our tour today.
Learning what life was like for ancient Egyptians presents many differences, and yet also surprising similarities to how people might live today. Understanding the daily lives of regular citizens so many thousands of years ago is ultimately what connects us as human beings.
Okay, so just some daily life stuff. People would have been different, but very similar to us in a lot of ways. Kylie wants me to bump into somebody. Let's bump into somebody. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Oh.
Jewelry was a popular item among ancient Egyptians of all social standing. Both men and women wore earrings, rings, and bracelets. Status determined how much jewelry a person wore and what it was made of. Common folk wore pearl necklaces, simple bracelets, and leather bangles. Brightly colored earthenware and glass paste were a favorite enhancement.
So you can see this guy's making some jewelry here.
The jewelry of the elite was made from gold, silver, and other precious stones. Because gold never lost its shine, it was considered akin to the flesh of the gods. Wide jeweled collars were a favorite. Made with rows of beads formed into patterns of animals or flowers, the soft chiming sounds they made were thought to appease the gods.
So you can see some of the jewelry that the rich people would have worn. Gold doesn't tarnish, so it's like the skin of the gods.
Though idealized, tomb paintings are a catalog of the changing fashions of ancient Egypt from the Old to the New Kingdom. Egyptians took appearance and cleanliness very seriously and were diligent about their fashion, hair, and jewelry, as well as their grooming habits.
So you can see These women have a loom. They're weaving fabric together here on an ancient loom. Egyptian cotton is very famous. Egyptian material, linen, very famous even today. It's highly prized.
The fabric of ancient Egyptian clothing was almost entirely made from various grades of linen. Linen was commonly white, draped over the body, and cinched at the waist, though some garments were sewn or tailored. Wealthy men wore long tunics, loincloths, or kilts, while poor men only wore loincloths. Women wore long dresses, with differences residing in the quality of the fabric, depending on social status. Egyptians commonly went barefoot, but could also wear sandals made from papyrus fiber or leather.
You can see some of their clothes here, those tunics. You can see these guys, it's basically just a long shirt with a belt around it. Would have been very typical for ancient people.
Cosmetics, including concoctions to prevent body odor and bad breath, were an integral part of everyday life for Egyptians. Used by both men and women, cosmetics were used as moisturizing ointments and sun protection as much as for beautification. Red ochre, a natural clay, was the most readily available cosmetic to tint lips and cheeks. Henna was used on nails and lips, and as hair coloring. It was also favored by richer women to decorate their palms and the soles of their feet.
So I'm not sure how many of you guys have ever had henna, like a henna tattoo, or had henna done where they draw on your body, but you can see that. That goes all the way back to ancient Egypt and before. And they were concerned about the same things we were, you know, deodorant and smelling good and perfumes and all that kind of stuff. Is what they were trying to do. So here's a scent shop, a perfume shop in the marketplace.
Egyptians believed kohl had magical powers, wearing it as black eyeliner to protect their eyes from the sun and to prevent eye infections from particles in the flooded Nile River. A special green kohl, made from ground malachite, was worn for ceremonies and religious rituals.
So you can see this guy's working with charcoal here. Egyptians very famously invented charcoal for eye makeup, and it would protect their their eyes from the sun a little bit, kind of like football players who wear the black on their cheeks. All right, somebody wanted me to run over something. Chickens? I didn't see any chickens. I missed the chickens somewhere. We'll see some chickens when we go to a house here in a minute. We're gonna hop this wall. There we go.
Women and teenage girls wore their hair long and often braided. Wealthier women included carved combs or hairpins. The length of men's hair rarely dropped past the shoulders. They were mostly clean-shaven during the dynastic period. A trend began by the elite and soon adopted by the general populace. Queen Hatshepsut donned an artificial beard when she became pharaoh.
So yeah, Landon, it would have not been good to badmouth the gods. People would have definitely got mad at you. They were very devout in their time. But yeah, Kylie, that is where eyeliner comes from, is that idea of charcoal. It was the first eyeliner.
Wigs were very popular, used for special occasions or to conceal gray hair or baldness. They were fastened in place with beeswax. The most expensive wigs were made from human hair and reserved for royalty. Other wigs were composed of linen, wool, or animal hair.
So you can see wigs here. So this is a wig in the Louvre in Paris. You can go to Paris and see this in a museum, an ancient Egyptian wig, which is pretty cool. So this guy's looks like he's at the barber shop, getting a rub down here.
Prepubescent children generally had their heads shaved. Young girls kept some strands intact, while young boys had a braid worn on the side.
So you can see that side braid was the fashion for young boys. But generally, little kids would shave their heads. Just don't even worry about the hair, boys and girls. So that is Egyptian fashion, some of the Egyptian stuff in the marketplace there that we're going to see. Now we're going to zoom across. You guys are wanting to see a goat. I wonder if... I think you're going to be disappointed. But let's ride out here to the desert and see if we can't find a goat. Oh, sorry, I'm running people over. Watch out for crocodiles here. There's something there. Oh, it's a hyena. Yeah, you just kind of bump into it. Yeah, if you run into animals, you just kind of bump into them. Can't quite go through them. Oh, more hyenas. Not seeing any goats on here. Alright, well, we tried. We'll keep our eye out. We're going to go over to a farm and check that out, if I can remember where the farm is. Where's the farm? There we go. All right. So again, just kind of seeing some daily life. Most of the people in Egypt would have been peasants and that kind of thing. So, you know, kind of seeing the what lower class people were going through is kind of interesting, because that's how all of us would have lived. You know, at that point in time, very, very few of us would have been rich enough to afford some of these other things. All right, so quick tour of a farm. Here's just a small Egyptian boat here, and we're up now. We're up in Lower Egypt, where the farmland is plentiful. This is the Nile Delta, where things start to fan out. I think it was Kylie did the picture of a Delta Airlines to kind of help her remember on the listen and sketch, which was pretty cool. I thought that was pretty funny. I think it was Kylie. If it wasn't, I'm remembering wrong. I'm sorry. So just kind of going up through the farmlands here, and let's not take the full tour. But you can see here is the first thing. This is the Shadoof, and what they did with this is... I don't know if I can do it here. Oh, this guy's going to do it. Perfect. So this is the river here, and what you would do is you would lower this bowl down into the river. Going to lower it down. Get to work, man. And then you would put it into that trough, and it would flow up to this spot, and then you would lower this one down and put it up into the trough, and it would fill up here. And then you could lock it so... Ooh, I didn't mean to jump that far. Then you could lock it so that the water would stay here. You put the little gate down, the water would stay here. You'd lower it, and then bring it up here to the next level, and then up here, and then you would have water that you could channel from here all over to your crops. And you could water your crops that way from these little canals. So wheat was grown. Wheat was very plentifully grown in Egypt. So I'm out here in a wheat field. You can see cotton being grown as well. And then here is where they would separate the wheat, and then you would tie a goat to the post here, and the goat would walk around in a circle, stamp down, and then you could separate out the good parts of the wheat from the bad parts, and then start to make flour to make bread with. So what happens if I go here? I'm just sitting around. Okay, so just some farming, just kind of interesting how they got the irrigation the water up from the river in these shadoofs. Yep, Eli, make sure we're not spamming the chat because I'm having a hard time seeing it. Okay. Yes, Mason, you can swim in the game. Most people back then couldn't swim, but you can swim in the game. The water thing, Jack, is called the Shadoof. All right, let's go to some houses. Where are the houses? I think is that in Fayoum? Trying to remember. Domesticated animals. Beer and bread. Household. There we go. Beer was also invented in Egypt. That's why there's a tour about beer. They grew lots of. I don't know if any of your parents do homebrew or anything like that, but they do. They grew lots of wheat in Egypt, and so they could use their extra to make beer. So that was kind of the drink of choice until the Romans and the Greeks introduced them to grapes and wine. Later on, that became more popular with the rich later on, but beer was something that lots of Egyptians drank. All right, so we're going to look at Egyptian households here. So this is our third area. So we're going to start this tour.
Welcome to the Egyptian household. Certain professions were open only to women, such as weaving or professional mourning, while others were available to both genders, including working as servants for the rich households. Social status did have an impact, though. The higher in status, the easier it was to obtain education and access different professions.
So Kylie, this is done about 3 o'clock. So we kind of talked about the weaving there.
Homes were generally composed of 3 rooms. First, there was the entrance, furnished with a small bench of brick, probably intended for a statue and protective divinity. Then there was the ceremonial room, meant to receive guests. The last room was either a bedroom or kitchen. Furniture consisted of basic chairs, chests, and storage. Tables were not used for family dinners. Instead, each individual had a small table of their own.
So they had like what we would call TV trays. Here's a soldier here. I'm not sure what he's doing here. But they would have like TV trays instead of a table that everyone would sit around. So you can see here, this would be one of the main living areas of the house. And everything's pretty outdoor. I mean, they have some doors to shut, not a lot of windows. This would be a poor person's house. Can't quite go into that section. If you climb up here, there's areas on the roof, and you can see there's straw mattresses. People would have slept outside on these straw mattresses. It would have been a lot cooler up here than inside. So people, I'm stuck. People would have slept outside. Up here, very little rain to worry about, so it's a good spot to go to sleep. Alright, we're going to go look at a wealthier person's house. A little more swag here.
Status and wealth played a large role in the style and size of ancient Egyptian homes. Commoners' houses were built with sun-baked mud bricks. Wealthier homes were often painted in white and decorated with various motifs.
So you can see this person's much, much wealthier. They have decorations on their house. They have a front porch. And then the room has a lot more furniture.
Town officials and the rich lived in mansions with numerous rooms that were luxuriously decorated. Only temples and tombs meant to last for all eternity were built with stone.
So they've got bookshelves here. We'll look at that here in a few minutes when we go to the Great Library. But you can see a lot more comfortable to be rich. Cushions, and this is a chair to sit in. Just a lot nicer areas to be. So if you wanted to sit and kind of lean up against stuff, you can do that here. Okay, stairs inside. This would have been a big luxury. Okay, different areas up here. Again, not a ton of furniture. Okay, here would have been a bed to sleep in. Kind of the master bedroom up here. Yeah, Tristan, you can die in this game, but not in this part, just because it's the discovery tour. It's the non-violent part. Okay, and you can see they've got a gorgeous porch there. Okay, but yeah, these guys are pretty wealthy here, so I'm gonna crawl all over their stuff. Here we go.
Funeral stone inscriptions focused on the main member of a household. Encircling this person would then be a spouse, parents, and children, possibly even siblings. These stones were so structured because there were no surnames in ancient Egyptian culture. Parents and children were a sort of family tree, which allowed for the identification of the deceased.
Okay, so we can see this is like their family tree, funeral stones in here, a little spot for their ancestors. Think like the Mulan movie where she's got that little shrine at her house for the ancestors. This would be very, very similar, minus the talking dragon, magical talking dragon, and all that little bit. So you can see some of the differences here. The poor lived in very basic homes, mud brick homes. The wealthy had, these big mansions here. This would be somebody who was a very rich person, town official. You can see the slaves are out and about, and everybody is kind of going about their day. The kitchen, another area we didn't get to, but the kitchen is over here. It's outside, of course, because you don't want all that heat on the inside. Where's the oven? So here's some storage areas for certain things over here. It's a table to prepare stuff, kind of an area to sit around. These guys are preparing food and stuff like that over here. I thought there was an oven over here somewhere. Am I forgetting where? Nope, that's outside of the house. We are very lucky to have air conditioning. Absolutely. This would have been very, very hot all the time for these guys. Yeah. All right. Daily life. So that was 3 things in daily life. Let's see here. Where should we go next? Hieroglyphics. Let's go into Alexandria. There we go. So Alexandria was a city in Lower Egypt on the northern, the very, very northern part of Egypt on the Mediterranean coast. When Alexander the Great came in the 330s BC and took over Egypt, he found out that they really didn't have a port there for trading with anybody, and so to get ships back to Greece from Egypt was really difficult because there was no port or harbor there for anything like that. And so he built a city, and of course, as you do in ancient times, you name that city after yourself. Oh, that guy's cruising. You name that city after yourself. So this is Alexandria. Where is he going? It's like a crazy horse guy. Must be like a high-speed chase or something. So this is the ancient city of Alexandria. Most of this today is underwater. There was a pretty big earthquake, I forget the year, 600-700 AD, that kind of tore the city apart and put a lot of it underwater because of the kind of the way the coastline changed with the earthquake. So you can see today you've got this big, beautiful harbor, lots of area for ships. Actually, in ancient times, about 1/3 of the city was made up of the royal palace. And so you can see over here is the huge area for the royal palace. And then the rest of the people live in the city here. We've got a Greek theater, which we'll talk about a little bit more when we get to Greece. And we've got a huge temple up here. And then this building over here, my bird over here, is the Great Library, one of the most famous spots in Alexandria. Now, this isn't an Egyptian, even though it's in Egypt, this is a Greek-style city. Alexander the Great, as we'll learn, was Greek. And so, yeah, Alexandria is named after Alexander the Great, Mason. Yeah, absolutely. And Cleopatra was about 300 years after Alexander the Great, so she would not have known Alexander the Great, but Cleopatra had a crush on Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, who were both really important Roman generals later on. So this is the Great Library of Alexandria, which was founded by the ruling families. So Alexandria was taken over by the Ptolemies, who were Greek. One of his generals, Ptolemy, Alexander the Great's generals, Ptolemy took over, and his family ruled for about 300 years. And actually, Cleopatra, the person that we are right here, she is the last Ptolemy and the last pharaoh of Egypt. And so we can see this library here, which would have been really, really important in ancient times, and it was the biggest collection of knowledge in world history. Okay, we've got the statue to, this isn't Zeus, this is, I forget who this is. It's a Greek Egyptian hybrid god, Zeusamon. I forget his name. He's got the big temple. Yeah, the bird is your pet eagle. It helps you see areas. So the statues are strategically covered for the discovery mode of the game to keep everything educational, in case you see that. The scrolls here, the bookshelves, remember they wouldn't have had books necessarily. Everything would have been written on scrolls. And so the shelves are designed not to hold books like we would think of them, but scrolls. And this was the largest collection of knowledge in the world. And we're going to do some vandalism here. Climb up. There's stairs, so you don't have to do that. But they had huge numbers of bookshelves here. Yeah, Landon, this game does have a Greek version. It's called Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And we'll be playing that, and I'll live stream the Discovery Tour on that. Thanks, narrator. I'll be doing a live stream of that in a couple of weeks when my class starts studying Greece. But you can see lots of people kind of milling about here. This is Hades right here. You can see Cerberus, the three-headed dog, okay, guarding the gates of the underworld. And Hades right there. So we've got different statues here, kind of honoring the gods. The mosaic floor. Very intricate design, lots of different colored tiles and those kinds of things. And just a huge library here that would have been accessible in Egypt for the mostly Greek-speaking population of Alexandria. So most of these books would have been written in Greek, even in Roman times. Again, Jack, this is Hades isn't the devil. In Greek mythology, you got to kind of not think of the Disney version necessarily. Hades is not the devil in Greek mythology. The Disney version kind of makes him out to be, but in ancient Greece, remember Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades just basically drew straws to see who would control each thing. And so Hades got the underworld and the land of the dead, Zeus got the sky, and Poseidon got the sea. So that was just kind of the way things worked out. So one of the ancient wonders of the world, this library. Another one, really, really important ancient wonder of the world in Alexandria is the lighthouse. And let's just zoom over there because we can really quickly. Yeah, we'll just go to the top here. So the Lighthouse of Alexandria, this is another one of these huge, massive buildings, and this would guide sailors in even at night. Lighthouses were a luxury, but they kept a huge bonfire burning at the top so that people could see. In the daytime, you'd be able to see the smoke and know you're getting close. In the nighttime, you'd be able to see the fire and know that you were getting close and kind of have an idea of how to get into the harbor of Alexandria. So you can see here, we're way up at the top. This is a huge, huge building, and they've got the bonfire going here so that people, at nighttime in the dark, you'd be able to see this from a long way away because it was so high up. That light would have traveled. You've got the wood here. And all that kind of stuff. So this was a really, really famous monument. It was destroyed in an earthquake, the same earthquake that sunk the city. The lighthouse went under the water. So parts of it are still there. It's just under the Mediterranean Sea at this point. So I think you can go scuba dive parts of this. And you can't. This building is so tall you can't jump off the whole thing. But everybody always asks me to jump off, so we'll jump off. There, that's a long jump. And Cleopatra would totally survive that jump if she could. Alright, I want to do one more tour here where we talk about hieroglyphics. And then we'll be done. Yes, Mason, you would totally be dead if you did that. Yeah, there's a staircase inside. You wouldn't have to climb up the whole thing. But yeah, there's staircases and stuff inside, so they could carry the wood up. They may even had an elevator system to get the wood up there. I'm not sure about that. But worst case scenario, they could just come up. All right, so we're going to look at hieroglyphics here. This is the Egyptian writing system.
Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Hieroglyphs. Hieroglyphics were used as sacred writing, appearing on monuments, statues, and sacred papyrus texts. The earliest symbols that resemble hieroglyphs were on pottery dating back to 4000 BCE. This stylized form of signs and drawings was the only writing used from its ancient origins to the end of pharaonic history. Ancient Egyptians referred to hieroglyphs as the writing of the gods.
Okay, so we can see some of these symbols, picture symbols, pictographs.
Considered a difficult language, it was intended for pharaohs, nobility, and priests, and meant to be used in ceremonies, within tombs, and for government records. Since few Egyptians were able to read the ancient hieroglyphs, the mythological aura around the language was persistent, even in their own culture.
So you can see the scribes, we talked about that. It was a difficult language, and one of the reasons it was difficult is because the scribes, it would take them a long time, and also they didn't want the commoners to really know what the language was. These rams are a symbol of Zeus Ammon, and Ammon is Ra, the god of the sun, and Zeus is Zeus, the god of the sky. And during the Greek times, after Alexander the Great's conquest, these gods were kind of merged. And so Zeus and Ra kind of merged together and became Zeus Ammon, and the ram became the symbol for Zeus Ammon. So you can see those there.
The structure of hieroglyphs offers insight into Egyptian culture, not just in what the translations say, but in the structure of the symbols themselves. They were found on tomb walls, on sarcophagi, on statues, and on pottery, and were meticulously recorded in countless ancient papyri.
So the papyrus was the paper. It was made out of the reeds from the Nile. We got a couple of soldiers here, Greek soldiers here guarding this area. I'm the pharaoh though, so we can go through just fine. Back in class, I've got a notebook actually made of papyrus paper
In
that you
many
guys could
temples,
see. But
priests would perform rituals and daily offerings. These were accompanied by hieroglyphs used as spells. In tomb paintings, the hieroglyphs are represented with formulas to recite. These spoken words were meant to be spells which would allow the deceased to benefit from the offerings for all eternity. Spells and offerings were also written for the living, to enhance medicines and cure illnesses.
so the reason they have writing on the tomb, these are spells. These are things that are designed to keep the person in the tomb happy and healthy, and their body, continuing to go. And if you think about the word spell, like spelling a word, there's a reason that it's the same as a spell, like a magic spell, and it's because people considered writing to be magic back in the day.
The most famous of ancient Egyptian documents is the Book of the Dead. Written in hieroglyphs and hieratic texts, it depicts important spells and rituals. These spells were intended to ensure a smooth transition from life to death and allow the deceased to safely navigate the perils of the afterlife.
So we can see here Osiris, and what's the alligator god's name? I forget. The devourer of the souls. Osiris is the one with the two things in his hands sitting on the throne. He's the god of the dead, and he's got the crook, the curved, the hook-shaped symbol. And then you've got the Thoth, the ibis god here, god of knowledge, and then you've got Anubis over here, the god of mummification. He's the one with the jackal head, and he's weighing the soul on the Ankh, the symbol of life there. And if your soul doesn't add up, then you'll get devoured by the beasts and not make it into the afterlife. So they're weighing the heart here.
Even after it was deciphered, the reading of hieroglyphs remained difficult at times due to the many directions in which they can be read. Depending on the orientation of the signs, hieroglyphs can be read left to right, right to left, horizontally or vertically, though never bottom to top.
So lots of different directions on the hieroglyphs can sometimes make it tough to decipher.
A clue on which way to read is to first notice which direction the figurative signs are facing. If a pictogram is looking to the right, then the reader is meant to start from the right and read towards the figure. Column text on a papyrus begins from the right, then goes top to bottom for each column.
Yep, good job, Landon and Eli. The croc is the soul eater.
Text written on tomb walls resembles the structure of a page from a comic book. The text can be placed in front, behind, or above the character, and its symbols look in the same direction as the character. Another clue is that the name of a god or hieroglyphs meaning gods or kings are always written before the descriptive text.
That's kind of cool. Think of it like a comic book.
Compared to alphabetical languages, Egyptian hieroglyphs have more symbols. Confronted with the absence of vowels, the Egyptians invented a category of signs. When placed at the end of words, these signs help inform its meaning. For instance, a drawing of a lion will refer to a lion and also relate to the abstract concept of a lion as something dangerous or powerful.
So you can kind of see how it might be confusing. A lion might mean a lion, or it might mean the word dangerous, or even the word powerful. And so you kind of have to interpret from based on what else is in the sentence to kind of figure out what they are. Jack, we'll get into how they figured it out here in a second.
Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs contained a little more than 700 signs. By the end of the Greco-Roman period, there were 10,000 signs. Egyptologist Sir Alan Gardner created a list classifying common hieroglyphic signs and their variants.
So there's the alphabet. They didn't really have an alphabet, but can you imagine being a kid, trying to sing the ABC song, but there's 700 different signs to memorize in ancient times, and then later on they got up to 10,000 signs, which is pretty crazy. It's a lot to learn. School would have been tough.
Ancient Egyptian languages have many similarities with Asian and African languages. They have evolved in similar ways to the various forms of written Egyptian. These languages belong to the Hamito-Semitic group. There were 5 clear evolutions in the Egyptian language, each with their own distinctive structure. These languages are known as Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, and Coptic. Coptic is the only living language that allows linguists to define the vowel structure and to distinguish different dialects.
So you can see this priest is also a scribe, so he's writing something. You'd come in and hire, if you needed something written, you'd hire somebody to do that.
While hieroglyphs and hieratic script give us an idea as to how the ancient Egyptian language was structured and written, the way it was spoken is still up for debate. The team opted for English as the spoken language, with the characters using ancient Egyptian and Greek words and accents. The language that is spoken in the background by the crowds is largely based on Sir Alan Gardner's Egyptian grammar. To help resurrect a dead language, we consulted Egyptologists and dialogue coaches to establish our target sound, and cast actors with Arabic, Hebraic, and African backgrounds to bring the game to life.
Pretty cool behind the scenes there. All the background dialogue is in ancient Egyptian, or as close as we could figure out to what that sounds like. Ancient Egyptian died out when the Arabs and the Muslims came in and took over. That language was no longer spoken. Arabic became the common language.
After Alexander the Great's arrival in Egypt and the establishment of his reign, Greek became the language used by the governing bodies. The inability to read hieroglyphs caused resentment among the Greek population. It's from this tension that the Rosetta Stone was created.
So and you can see here the Rosetta Stone, which is how we figured out how to read hieroglyphics. At the top, you've got hieroglyphics. In the middle, you have Coptic. And on the bottom, you have Greek. And it's the same message. And from there, they were able to figure it all out together. Eli, let's make sure we're not spamming the chat.
The spread of Christianity ended pharaonic culture and resulted in the destruction of its pagan monuments. This also marked the end of hieroglyphic writing and understanding.
So as the Christians came in, lost the hieroglyphics and that kind of stuff here. I think this is the end of our tour here. Go down in this temple, but this is the forget what this is. This might be the oracle, or the oracle that Alexander the Great goes to, where he discovers conveniently that Zeus is his father, not the guy he probably murdered to become the king. So he finds that out in Siwa here in Egypt. Okay. All right. We're going to wrap this up here. If you're in my class, we went to several different spots. Today, we went to the Temple of Sekhmet. We went to the Egyptian fashion marketplace. We went to a farm. We went to some houses. We went to the Great Library and the Great Lighthouse. in Alexandria, and then we finished with some information on hieroglyphics in Siwa, which is the oasis out in the middle of the desert here. And I think it was a pretty good tour. We'll do this again at least 2 more times, but we'll be in ancient Greece at that point. We won't be flying around with Senu, but we'll be flying around with, I think it's Icaros is the eagle's name in that game. So we'll be checking out ancient Greece once my class gets to that here in a few weeks in May. All right, thank you guys. You guys are awesome, and glad you guys could make it. And this will be posted for anybody who couldn't make it to the Google Classroom. All right, thanks again, and take care and stay safe and stay healthy. All right, guys, talk to you later. Bye.